When you hear the name Medusa, what comes to mind? Perhaps you imagine a hideous monster with venomous snakes writhing from her scalp, eyes glowing with unnatural fury, and a face so terrifying that one glance could turn the strongest warrior into stone. In countless retellings, Medusa has been cast as a villain, a cursed creature lurking on the edge of the world, waiting for a brave hero to slay her. But Medusa's story is more than just that of a monster. Her myth is a tapestry woven with threads of beauty, violence, divine wrath, transformation, and injustice. She is both feared and revered, condemned and worshipped, monstrous and divine. And when we look closely, her tale asks us a question that has haunted human storytelling for centuries. Who decides who the monster really is? In this video, we will explore the untold story of Medusa. We'll trace her origins in Greek mythology, uncover how her transformation shaped her destiny, revisit the tale of Perseus and her tragic end, and dive deep into how her image has shifted over centuries, from feared creature to feminist icon, from symbol of terror to emblem of resilience. By the end, you may find yourself asking, was Medusa truly a monster, or was she a misunderstood woman punished by forces far beyond her control? In the beginning, Medusa was not a monster. She was one of three sisters known as the Gorgons, daughters of the ancient sea deities Phorcys and Ceto. The names of her sisters were Stheno and Euryale. Together, the three Gorgons represented primal forces of fear and chaos. But unlike her sisters, who were immortal, Medusa was mortal. This detail may seem small, but it carried immense weight. Her mortality set her apart, not only in myth, but in destiny. She could be harmed, cursed, and ultimately slain, unlike her unkillable sisters. Different Greek writers gave slightly different accounts of her early life. Some described her as monstrous from birth, already cursed with serpents for hair. But in Ovid's Metamorphoses, one of the most influential sources, Medusa began as a stunningly beautiful woman. She was admired for her long, silky hair, said to shine like strands of gold under the sun. Her beauty was so great that it captured the attention of mortals and gods alike. But beauty in Greek mythology was rarely a blessing, it was often a curse. Beauty attracted envy, lust, and danger. And for Medusa, it would be the very thing that led to her downfall. According to Ovid, Medusa's beauty caught the attention of Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea. In some versions of the myth, he was enamored with her and seduced her willingly. But in Ovid's retelling, a version that resonates with modern readers, Medusa was not seduced. She was raped. The setting of this violent act was particularly significant. Poseidon forced himself upon Medusa inside the temple of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. This act not only violated Medusa, but also desecrated the sacred space of a powerful deity. Here we see one of the greatest injustices of the myth. For Medusa was not the aggressor, she was the victim. Yet the punishment did not fall upon Poseidon, the mighty Olympian god. Instead, it fell upon Medusa. When Athena discovered what had happened in her temple, her response was not compassion but anger. To the Greeks, the gods often represented forces of nature, not morality. They did not always act fairly or kindly, and their punishments could be cruel. Athena, enraged by the desecration of her temple, decided to direct her wrath toward Medusa. She transformed the maiden's beautiful hair into a nest of venomous snakes. Her once beautiful face was twisted into one so terrifying that anyone who looked upon it would turn to stone. It is here that Medusa's transformation into a monster was sealed. From victim, she became villain. From beauty, she became horror. From admired woman, she became feared creature. Why did Athena punish her and not Poseidon? Scholars have debated this for centuries. Some suggest it was because Athena, as a virgin goddess, despised any desecration of her temple, regardless of fault. Others argue that punishing Poseidon, a powerful Olympian, was not possible, even for her. Instead, she took out her fury on the mortal woman who could not defend herself. This act reflects a painful truth that has echoed across human history. Women often bear the punishment for crimes committed against them. Medusa's curse is not just a mythological story. It is a metaphor for victim blaming that remains painfully relevant even today. From that moment onward, Medusa was no longer seen as a woman but as a monster. Her hair writhed with snakes. Her eyes gleamed with fatal power. She became a creature so terrifying that mortals and heroes alike dared not face her. But here's the paradox. While Medusa was cursed to live as a monster, her image began to serve as protection. Ancient Greeks carved her likeness, the Gorgonian, onto shields, armor, and temples. Her head, though terrifying, was believed to ward off evil spirits and protect warriors in battle. So was Medusa truly evil, or was she, even in her cursed form, still protecting others? It's as if her tragedy turned her into both a monster to fear and a guardian to revere. In fact, even Athena herself eventually placed Medusa's head upon her aegis, her shield, as a symbol of divine strength and protection. The goddess who once cursed her now carried her image as a badge of honor. This strange irony hints that Medusa's story is not so simple. She was feared, yes, but also powerful, respected, and enduring. After her transformation, Medusa retreated to a desolate place at the edge of the known world. Myths describe her lair as dark, remote, and filled with stone statues, frozen remains of those who dared to enter. Here, Medusa lived in exile. No longer a maiden admired for her beauty, she was a creature feared for her power. Some accounts suggest she became vengeful, embracing her monstrous identity. Others portray her as lonely, isolated, and tragic, cursed not only with deadly power, but also with eternal solitude. And so, when we think of Medusa, we must ask, was she truly a monster, or was she a victim forced into isolation by a curse she did not deserve? Medusa's story takes its most famous turn when she crosses paths with Perseus, one of Greek mythology's greatest heroes. Perseus was the son of Zeus and Danae, a demigod destined for greatness. But like many Greek heroes, his journey began with a challenge, an impossible task that would test his courage, wit, and endurance. The challenge came from King Polydectes of Seriphos. Polydectes desired Perseus' mother, Danae, but Perseus stood in the way. To rid himself of the young hero, Polydectes devised a cunning plan. He demanded that Perseus bring him the head of Medusa. This was no ordinary request. Everyone knew Medusa's gaze turned men to stone. To face her meant almost certain death. Yet Perseus accepted the task, not out of choice but necessity. And so, the fates of hero and monster became intertwined. Perseus would not face Medusa alone. Several gods intervened to help him, each providing tools that would make the impossible possible. Athena, goddess of wisdom, lent him her polished shield, reflective like a mirror. This would allow him to face Medusa without meeting her deadly gaze directly. Hermes, the messenger god, gave Perseus a pair of winged sandals, enabling him to fly swiftly across land and sea. He was also given a sword, sharp enough to cut through even the toughest of monsters. And from Hades, lord of the underworld, Perseus received the helm of invisibility, which would cloak him from sight. Armed with these divine gifts, Perseus set out to find Medusa's lair, guided by the gods themselves. Medusa lived in exile, far from human civilization. Myths describe her lair as a cave surrounded by petrified statues, the remains of warriors and adventurers who had dared to face her and failed. The sight alone must have filled Perseus with dread, but Perseus had one advantage: Athena's shield. By holding it before him like a mirror, he could navigate the cave without ever looking directly at Medusa. Imagine the tension in that moment. The hero stepping quietly into the darkness, snakes hissing in the shadows, statues frozen in lifelike terror. Every step was a risk, every sound a warning. Perseus' heart must have pounded as he drew closer to the cursed woman. At last, Perseus found Medusa asleep. In this moment, the mighty monster was vulnerable, not the terrifying figure of legend, but a woman cursed into eternal solitude. Yet Perseus could not hesitate. With his eyes fixed on the reflection in his shield, Perseus raised his sword and severed Medusa's head with one swift strike. Her blood spilled across the ground, and from it sprang two miraculous beings: Pegasus, the winged horse, symbol of freedom and inspiration; Chrysaor, a giant or warrior with a golden sword. These children, fathered by Poseidon, had been hidden within Medusa, released only at her death. Their birth symbolized the strange duality of Medusa's curse. Even in death, she gave life. Perseus placed Medusa's head into a special bag to carry it safely, knowing its deadly power remained even after her death. Medusa's death did not end her influence. In fact, her severed head became more powerful than ever. Perseus used it as a weapon to turn enemies into stone. He used it against the sea monster that threatened Andromeda, saving her from a terrible fate. Later, he used it to defeat King Polydectes, the very man who had sent him on the deadly quest. Eventually, Perseus gave the head to Athena. The goddess, who had once cursed Medusa, placed it upon her aegis, her shield or breastplate. From then on, the image of Medusa became a divine emblem, a symbol of protection and power. This irony cannot be overlooked. The woman cursed and cast out by Athena was now the central symbol of her strength. The victim had become the weapon. To the ancient Greeks, Medusa's face was both terrifying and sacred. The Gorgonian, the image of her head, was carved into temples, shields, coins, and jewelry. It was believed to ward off evil spirits and protect the wearer. This duality is fascinating. Medusa, once portrayed as a dangerous monster, was also revered as a guardian. Her power was not simply destructive, it was protective. Her image became a shield against misfortune, a reminder that even horror could serve as defense. In fact, in some ancient accounts, Medusa was even worshipped as a goddess in her own right. She embodied the primal forces of fear and awe, showing that what terrifies us can also protect us. The myth of Medusa is layered with symbolism that reflects ancient Greek society. Fear of female power. Medusa, once beautiful and admired, became dangerous when her beauty was transformed into power. Her gaze, which once attracted, now destroyed. This reflects the ancient unease with women who held influence or independence. Victim blaming. Medusa's curse reminds us how victims of violence were often punished instead of protected, a reality that continues in many cultures today. The ambiguity of monsters. Medusa blurs the line between villain and victim. She is terrifying, yes, but only because she was made so by forces beyond her control. In many ways, Medusa was a mirror of human fears and desires. She represented the fear of unchecked female sexuality, the dread of divine punishment, and the fascination with the thin line between beauty and terror. Looking at her story, one could argue that Medusa was less a monster and more a tragic heroine. She was born mortal among immortals, admired for her beauty but cursed for it, punished for a crime committed against her, and ultimately slain for being what the gods had made her. Her death brought life, her head brought protection, and her image endured as a symbol far greater than the gods who cursed her. So again, we must ask, was Medusa truly a monster? Or was she a misunderstood woman, condemned by injustice and transformed into a weapon for others to wield? For centuries, Medusa was remembered as the terrifying monster slain by Perseus. But as time passed, especially in the modern era, her story began to be re-examined. Scholars, artists, and thinkers asked, what if Medusa wasn't the villain, but the victim? In the 20th and 21st centuries, feminist writers and artists reclaimed Medusa as a symbol of female rage, resistance, and empowerment. Instead of seeing her snakes as a curse, they saw them as a crown. Instead of her gaze as a punishment, they viewed it as a form of self-defense, a weapon against those who would harm her. Feminist philosopher Helene Sixus wrote about Medusa in her famous essay The Laugh of the Medusa, 1975, urging women to embrace their voices and bodies without shame. She described Medusa not as ugly or monstrous, but as laughing, alive, powerful, unapologetic. This reinterpretation transformed Medusa from a figure of fear into an icon of strength. She became a symbol for women who had been silenced, abused, or vilified, a reminder that anger and defiance could also be forms of power. Beyond feminism, Medusa has also been studied in psychology. Sigmund Freud famously used the term Medusa's head to describe the fear of female sexuality that men might experience. To him, her petrifying gaze symbolized male castration anxiety. While Freud's interpretation reflects his own time and biases, it underscores how deeply Medusa's image has penetrated human thought. She represents the unsettling power of the gaze, how simply being seen can be dangerous, threatening, or transformative. In modern psychology, Medusa has also been discussed as a metaphor for trauma. Victims of violence may feel monstrous or frozen by their experiences, just as Medusa was transformed against her will. Yet by reclaiming her story, survivors can also find empowerment, turning pain into strength, just as Medusa's head became a weapon of protection. Medusa's face has been immortalized in countless works of art, from ancient Greek pottery to Renaissance masterpieces and modern fashion. Ancient Greece, the Gorgonian appeared on shields, temples, and coins, serving as both a warning and protection. Renaissance, artists like Caravaggio painted Medusa with vivid horror, capturing the moment of her beheading with chilling realism. Modern times, fashion houses like Versace adopted Medusa's head as a logo, symbolizing allure, power, and timeless beauty. In film and literature, she has appeared as both villain and anti-hero. From Clash of the Titans to Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters, Medusa continues to haunt popular imagination. Sometimes she is a monster to be feared. Other times, she is portrayed with sympathy, a tragic figure wronged by the gods. This duality is what keeps her relevant. Medusa is never just one thing. She shifts with the culture that tells her story. One reason Medusa resonates so strongly today is because she embodies the power of anger. For too long, women's anger was dismissed, ridiculed, or punished. But Medusa's myth reminds us that anger is not always destructive. It can also be protective, transformative, and just. Her petrifying gaze can be seen as a metaphor for the paralyzing effect of truth, of facing injustice directly. To look into her eyes is to be confronted with the consequences of violence, power, and oppression. No wonder the ancients feared her. She forced them to see what they would rather ignore. Interestingly, Medusa is not unique to Greek mythology. Many cultures have figures that resemble her, women who are demonized for their beauty, independence, or power. In Indian mythology, Kali is often misunderstood as terrifying, when she is also a mother and protector. In Mesopotamian myths, Lamashtu was a demoness feared for harming children, but also invoked as a protector. In African folklore, serpent-haired or serpent-associated women often carry both destructive and protective qualities. These parallels suggest that Medusa taps into something universal, humanity's ambivalent relationship with female power. So, after journeying through her myth, her transformation, her death, her symbolism, and her reinterpretation, what can we conclude about Medusa? On the surface, she is a monster slain by a hero. But beneath the surface, she is a victim of injustice, punished for a crime committed against her. She is a woman transformed into something terrifying, not by her own choice, but by divine wrath. And even in death, she was used as a weapon by others. Yet, her story did not end with her beheading. Medusa endures because she represents more than a monster. She represents the duality of power and vulnerability, horror and protection, victimhood and resistance. She is a mirror in which we see our deepest fears and also our potential for transformation. Was Medusa a monster? Perhaps to some. Was she misunderstood? Absolutely. But maybe, just maybe, she was something even more, a survivor whose story still speaks to us across millennia. And that was the untold story of Medusa, the monster who might not have been a monster at all. What do you think? Was she truly a villain, or was she the victim of divine injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into mythology, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories from the shadows of history and myth. And remember, sometimes the monsters we fear are just misunderstood.